Our second Smart. Hello, everyone. Good evening, and thank you for attending our second Smart Power webinar, explaining the virtues of battery storage solutions for your home. I'm Peter Schweinfurth. I chair the Board of Selectmen's Energy Management Advisory Committee, or EMAC. EMAC was convened in early 2021 to advise the Board of Selectmen and other town departments and bodies on building energy efficiency and renewables. Our motto is save more, pollute less. One of EMAC's functions is to organize educational sessions like this one. Previous workshops included discussion of net zero energy buildings, geothermal energy, and our current solar plus battery campaign. This evening, I'm very pleased to have Bob Wall, Vice President of SmartPower, and Steve Reynolds, a Greenwich resident and a commercial and residential solar PV and battery installer, to offer practical insights and recommendations. So before we begin, let me quickly share some resources with you. Well, this one is a bit messy. Let's find my Google Chrome. There we go. All righty. If you are interested, EMAC has its own page on the Town of Greenwich website, and then you find our calendar. You can see here a link for tonight's event, most recent agendas, some prior workshops that we did, our annual reports, other documents. This might be more interesting. PowerSmart Greenwich.wee.green for additional information on this campaign, including a lovely little video down here, which is kind of fun, battery storage incentive video, which is Connecticut specific. Also Connecticut specific here is energystoragect.com. And finally, you might find this fun, sunroof.withgoogle.com, and you can type in your address here and take a look at your home's roof to see whether or not it would be a good candidate for a solar PV. So with that, as we like to say, knowledge is power. So let me introduce Bob Wall from SmartPower.
Thank you, Peter. It's nice to be with friends from Greenwich. I'm actually here a little bit to the east up in Fairfield, and as Peter mentioned, I am with a nonprofit organization called SmartPower. We were founded here in Connecticut 22 years ago, and we've since moved our headquarters to Washington, D.C., and expanded from Connecticut to work not only coast to coast in the United States, but also in places as exotic as India. And one of our most popular programs has been the Solarize program, which we ran for many years here in Connecticut. And this is essentially sort of a next generation of Solarize, in that it includes both solar energy systems as well as battery storage systems. So a little bit about PowerSmart. This is, as I said, a community-based program a la Solarize, intended to last roughly 20 weeks, but who's counting? And it's for the purpose of promoting residential battery storage and solar for both existing solar and non-current solar owners. When I say residential, it also encompasses multifamily housing. So if you or anyone you know is an owner of a multifamily property, they could take advantage of the program. And quite frankly, commercial customers can also take advantage of these same programs, although I understand that the battery storage program on the commercial side is currently being paused because they've already kind of expended the outlays for this time period. It will be reopened in the near future. And we receive our funding exclusively from the U.S. Department of Energy. We're part of a large team that is led by academic partners at Yale and NYU, who ultimately will publish a study examining the co-adoption of solar and advanced technologies. For purposes of PowerSmart, we're talking about battery storage systems in Connecticut, but they are looking into other advanced technologies such as electric vehicles and energy efficiency. So that should come out at the conclusion of our work. This is one of 28 campaigns, so consider yourself lucky that you were chosen for this campaign. So solar has been increasingly popular in Connecticut. The program really started with what is now the Connecticut Green Bank back in the early 2000s, and it really took off when we started offering solarized campaigns, and Greenwich was one of the more than 100 communities that participated in solarize about a decade ago. The Green Bank reached its targets that were established by the Connecticut State Legislature, and as a result, their program was allowed to sunset, and a new program that's administered by Eversource and UI took over at the beginning of 2022. At the same time, the original net metering program was also retired, and it was replaced by two different variations on net metering, which I will talk to, and perhaps our other speaker, Steve Reynolds, will talk in more depth on that. But it's one of the ways to help pay for your system. So there are many reasons why people choose to go solar. I've chosen the top three in my mind. One is the cost savings. Going solar can help reduce your electricity bill and hedge against future price increases. We know all too well that over time, the cost of electricity goes up. And if you own solar, you're essentially stabilizing that cost and you save money over time. Studies have also showed that going solar can increase the value of your home. So it's a really sound investment. And last but certainly not least, you can help the environment by reducing the greenhouse gases that are emitted from conventional power plants, and also reduce water use associated with producing that power. So there are many, many other reasons. It's great for the local economy and so forth and so on. But there are a lot of great reasons to go solar. There are a few main considerations for whether your house is appropriate for solar. One is orientation. The best orientation is south facing, but east and west and anything in between is also suitable. For those where a roof is not suitable for solar, you may be able to do a ground mounted system if you have the space and it's unshaded, because shading is the second key consideration for going solar. You want to be free of shade from trees and your own chimneys, dormers, and other rooftop appurtenances. It may be possible to remove a tree or cut some branches on the trees, but truth is, a lot of people who like solar also love their trees. We all love trees and they offer many benefits, but there are options here if you do have trees. And Connecticut is a very wooded environment, so a lot of people are simply unsuitable for solar. I sadly am unsuitable for both reasons, 1 and 2, and probably 3, which is the age of your roof. Ideally, you want the roof to be under 10 years old and in good shape, for the simple reason that you don't want to have to remove the panels in order to reshingle the roof. So when you speak with a contractor, they will ask all these questions and make determinations if it's advisable to reshingle your roof before you proceed with solar or not. And this is just a slide to give an idea of basic costs here. They're often expressed in terms of watts, but typically they're sold in increments of kilowatts. So you would multiply this price by 1,000 to convert from watts to kilowatts. And looking at the table below, let's assume a 10 kilowatt system, which may be a little bit larger than the state average, but it's heading in that direction. So the original cost of solar would be approximately $28,000. It could be more or less depending on the equipment you choose and the price quoted to you. But that is reduced by a 30% federal tax credit. This was appropriated under the Inflation Reduction Act. It was on its way to oblivion, and it was not only restored but extended for a period of 10 years. And I think we're about 2 or 3 years into that window. So for the near future and for the next 7 or so years, the 30% will come right off the top, or actually you will pay the full amount, but then you can take the tax credit in the year that the system is installed. And if you can't use it all, it will roll over until it's used up. I mentioned the net metering. There are 2 different options now. One is buy all and the other is netting. Netting is considered more comparable to the original form of net metering. And if you're interested in choosing a battery storage system, you must choose the netting option. And again, your contractor can explain this in greater detail, but the table will illustrate, what the initial costs are, what the costs are after the application of the tax credit, and then what your savings are likely to be over a period of 25 years or so. So it's very attractive. And I'm going to move on to batteries now, but Steve will come in a bit later, and he will talk in a little bit more depth on solar systems and address some of the other issues. But batteries are relatively new for powering one's house. We're all familiar with the gas and diesel generators that get turned on when the power goes out. And unfortunately, the power has been going out more frequently over the past decade or so. But if you think about it, we're already using batteries pretty much throughout our daily lives. You wake up, you brush your teeth with an electric, battery-powered toothbrush. Our computers, laptops, phones, even our lawn care equipment, and increasingly our cars are powered by batteries. So batteries do work quite well. It's just that they're relatively new for homes, but rest assured they work quite well in that context. Just like solar, there are a lot of benefits to owning a battery storage system. First and foremost, it gives you a backup power source when the grid goes down. And unlike the others, this one is clean. It doesn't smell, and it's very secure. You can also use the battery storage system to use the power that you've created from your solar system after the sun goes down. That's often one of the things that people who aren't fans of solar will point to, that it's only good when the sun is shining. Well, with a battery, you can employ it at any time. You can also earn money by helping the grid, and we'll get into this program called Energy Storage Solutions, whereby you agree to sell power that's stored in your battery, and you will receive payments twice a year over a period of 10 years from the utility. And this helps to avoid turning on the dirtiest power plants. So when we've had peak demand, such as we've had the last couple of weeks, a lot of those days, they have to go out and purchase power from plants that aren't normally feeding into the grid. And those are often oil or gas. So they're not only extremely dirty in terms of the emissions, but they're also very expensive. So they're also helping to lower the cost of keeping the grid operating during those periods. And if you have critical medical devices, this is one way to ensure that they will keep running if the power goes out. So if you do decide to adopt a battery storage system, you basically have 2 main choices, one of which is just to buy it outright, meaning that you don't plan to enroll in the state program. And under this option, you are entitled to the same 30% tax credit that we discussed under solar, but you would be foregoing the other state incentives that I'll describe shortly. The benefits are you're free to choose any licensed contractor, and you can also choose any make of battery. If you enroll in the official state program, you must choose an eligible contractor and an eligible technology. And best of all, you can use all the stored power whenever you want. You're under no obligation, and you won't be selling it to the grid. So the other option, as I mentioned, is the energy storage solutions. And this route entitles you not only to the 30% tax credit, but there's an upfront incentive. And thanks to a decision by the PURA, the regulatory authority, in December last year, they increased the maximum incentive up to $16,000. So, they increased the level of incentives for all the different categories, whether you're a standard customer, which is denominated baseline here, underserved, which is not Greenwich, but low income, which does include a number of Greenwich residents. They have different rates that you're compensated based on the kilowatt hours of the system you purchase. And then, as I mentioned, you will earn money from selling the stored power, not to UI in your case, but to Eversource. I'll explain that in a second. And as I indicated, you must use an approved contractor and battery type. So both of these lists are open, meaning that a contractor can apply to the list, and there are over 30, last time I looked, contractors that do residential projects, and the list of eligible technologies has grown. When the program started, there were only 3, and now we are up to about 12 different battery types. And again, if there's a new battery type, that manufacturer is free to apply to the program. So the idea is just to give customers a lot of choice here, but they want to make sure that the batteries will not only do what they're intended to do for your home, but they will be able to communicate with the grid in terms of sharing their stored power. So there's a term called grid edge, and if you live on the grid edge, you are entitled to a 50% adder, regardless of what category you're in. And grid edge is determined by the top 10% of electric circuits that experience the highest number of outages over the past decade, and the longest storm outages over that period. There's a link here, and I've already shared this presentation with Peter, and we'll put it onto the PowerSmart Greenwich website. But this is the link you can go to. Just enter your address to see if you happen to be on the grid edge. This is a screenshot grab of Greenwich, and you can see up in the kind of the northwest corner of Greenwich, there's quite a bit of streets that are on a grid edge circuit, and there's even some continuing down towards the Sound and along 95 corridor. But the simplest way is to put your address in and see if you qualify. So again, this entitles you to a 50% increase for the incentives you receive up front. And we talked about sharing your power with the grid. If you enroll in the program, you will be committing to do what's known as a passive dispatch. And this is mandatory. You agree to allow the utilities to purchase up to 80% of what's in your battery storage from 3 to 8 p.m. unless there is an active dispatch called, which would supersede the passive dispatch, or if there is a severe storm predicted, they will not draw your power because you might need to use it if the power does go out. And the active dispatches are less frequent, but they can be called during the June to September period, as well as in the winter time, November through March. It's a much shorter time period, but a longer window in which they can call those events. And the interesting thing with the active dispatch is the customer is free to opt out of it if it wants to make sure it has all the power, doesn't want to take a chance. So you're not required to sell your power under an active dispatch. That will mean, however, that you're getting less of a payment from the utilities at the end of the season if you opt out of those dispatches. Sizing is a critical issue, and it's a lot different from sizing a solar system, which is generally determined by how much power you use, how much roof space you have, and what your goals are. But similarly, you would work with your contractor to determine what do you need when the power goes down. For most people, there are a few critical items such as keeping the lights on, keeping the refrigerator on so your food doesn't spoil, having outlets to charge your phone and other devices, keeping the sump pump on so you don't flood out the basement. And then you would also want to consider how long you might want that backup power to run. But the good news is if you have solar, typically after a storm, we do experience sunny weather. So the batteries can recharge day after day as long as the sun is shining. But this is a conversation that you ought to have with your contractors and talk about what you want for an essential load. And they would essentially create a special panel so that in the event of an outage, only those items you choose would go on and draw from your battery. So you wouldn't want to run things like your air conditioner unless you really want to do that, but that would require a lot of batteries and would be very expensive. So people also ask, what is the size of a battery? And these are a couple of tours that we held this spring, and you can see the SunPower battery on the left is roughly the size of a refrigerator in terms of height and width. It's shallower than a fridge. And on the right, there's an Enphase inverter, which is more like a suitcase, a little bit longer than a suitcase, but they're also very shallow in depth. And if you did choose to get multiple batteries, depending on the size of your house and what you want to have running, it would be double the size of those units. But this just gives you an idea of what the size is like. So this is a screenshot of the list of eligible batteries currently, and one of the most notable additions in recent months has been that of the Tesla Powerwall, which is probably the best known battery, but until recently it was not eligible for the system. And because Tesla has not agreed to all of the terms to become an eligible contractor, you can enroll a Tesla Powerwall only in the active dispatch, and you will not be eligible for the upfront incentive. That could change if they become a full-fledged participant in the program. But other popular names are Enphase, Generac, and Cadenza, actually, which is a Connecticut-based battery headquartered up in Danbury. SunPower is another popular battery, but as I mentioned, they're trying to expand the options to allow more customer choice. And this is a table we created using a lot of information developed by the Green Bank from earlier this year. They took actual numbers. And so this average battery is sized at 8 kilowatts and also 18 kilowatt hours. There's a capacity and a power component. But the original cost for this hypothetical system was $31,500, and you can see on the standard column for most people, what the upfront incentive, the tax credit, and the performance-based incentive, shortened here to PBI, would be. And I can tell you that this PBI is a very conservative number. The original numbers that the Green Bank was using was larger. I think they wanted to be more conservative just so there were no unpleasant surprises, but it's quite likely that you would get more money over the 10-year period than is shown here. And that would result in a net cost of $13,100. But it could be lower if the PBI is higher on that. And also, if you happen to be on the grid edge, you would be receiving 50% greater upfront incentive. And similarly, on the low income side, the PORA decision increased the upfront incentive to $600 per kilowatt hour, which is 2.5 times what the standard rate is. They really want to encourage this and make it more affordable for those folks. And I see a hand is raised. Can we save those questions, or do you want to do them now, Peter?
Why don't we?
Might be easier to do them in a block, and we could either do it after Steve finishes or in between.
Well, we could. Why don't we take questions once you've wrapped up your slides?
Okay. So the low income, I almost erased this, knowing what I know about Greenwich, but really low income, there are people of all different income levels, but also there are people on fixed income levels. I have a colleague on my task force here in Fairfield who is retired, and as is her husband, and they qualified for the low income incentives for heat pumps. So I believe that the same would be true for a battery storage system. So you can save considerable amount of money if you qualify, and it's kind of a sliding scale dependent upon the number of people in a household. And there's a table on the Green Bank's site that explains what the rough qualification levels are. So there are different payment options. Obviously, for some people, they can pay in cash, and under that scenario, they would own the system, whether it's solar or batteries. They would get the incentives as well as the tax credits. But for most people, they would need to finance these systems, and one option is a loan, which under this version, you also would own the system and receive all the incentives and tax credits. One of the popular loan instruments is from the Connecticut Green Bank, their Smarty loan, which can be used for many home energy improvements. But other lenders also have loans that you can utilize. And then there is the lease or power purchase agreement option. Under this version, a third party would own the systems, and they would receive both the upfront incentive and the tax credit, but hopefully they would return those savings to you under the agreed contracts. And these are just a few of the popular contractors who do lease or PPA options: Trinity, Posigen, and Sunrun. So there's a link here on the best way to pay for solar. And also note that under the IRA, there are some special tax incentives, and Fairfield County was considered to be a special community. So you might be able to get an additional 10%, but only under this third-party ownership model. So again, it's a conversation you should have with your contractor, whether there are additional incentives. And the Green Bank might also be able to provide some advice on that, although they will be quick to note that they are not tax experts. And finding a contractor, as with any home improvement project, we recommend getting multiple quotes and references. If you are choosing a battery again and you want to enroll in the energy storage solutions, you have to work from that list, which is linked here, as well as the equipment. But if you're just going solar or don't intend to enroll in that energy storage program, you're free to work with any licensed contractor. So you can also visit the program website for the campaign, which is PowerSmartGreenwich.we with 2 E's .green. And there's a place where you can enter your home information, very basic stuff, and SmartPower or a technical consultant we've hired will contact you to try to answer your questions and assist you with the process. There's also a web platform called Energy Sage. That's the operator of it. You can get free quotes online, again, by entering your home information. And if a contractor is partnered with Energy Sage, they can provide you with quotes. So you can get multiple quotes without doing too much legwork. Or you can ask a friend who has solar or storage. It's easier to know somebody who has solar because you can generally see it on their rooftops, whereas battery storage is often hidden in a garage or a basement. But if you happen to know somebody, talk to them and ask about their experiences and how their situation worked. Again, this is the website where you can find out if solar and storage is right for you. There's a lot of general resources on there to provide further information. I created a couple of important links. This is one for the Residential Renewable Energy Solutions Program for solar, as well as the email for this program through Eversource, and a similar link for the battery storage program. And I believe this email will connect you with somebody at the Connecticut Green Bank. They administer this program jointly with Eversource and UI. And that is it for my presentation. So I know there was one hand raised. So if we want to open for questions, and then we'll have Steve Reynolds, who will be talking a little more in depth. So Sabina.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Could you please go back to that slide, back, I believe, example, average battery systems?
Yeah.
Yeah, that one. There are a couple of things that I find very confusing. The method is 250 asterisk kilowatt hours, or then on the right, the lower end. What is the asterisk and what is the 250 kilowatt there?
Okay, the $250 is the amount per kilowatt hour. So the asterisk is standing in for like a multiplier. I could have used X, but it's or a slash, but it's 250 per kilowatt hour. In this example, that was 18 kilowatt hours. So you multiply the size of your system by the amount of the upfront incentive, and same with on the low income side, except it's $600 per kilowatt hour.
Okay, so and the ITC, what is the ITC tax credit again?
That's the federal tax credit. It stands for investment tax credit. It's 30% of the net cost. So you have to reduce the state incentive, the $4,500 in this example, from the $31,500 original costs. And so you're getting the 30% on the balance of $27,000.
Okay.
And then after that, each year over a period of 10 years, you would be getting the performance incentives, and they would be cutting the checks after the summer season and then again after the winter season. So you'd be getting roughly 20 payments over that 10-year period.
When I first looked at the 80% number, that seemed very high. Just when you need your power the most, suddenly you're shifting 80% of your power over to Eversource. That seems a lot.
No, well, it's based on not when you need it. This is a typical day when there's no risk of an outage, for example. So you would be sharing up to 80% on a daily basis. But if there was a a threat of a storm that could knock out the power, they will not draw on your batteries whatsoever. So you'll be keeping it and you'll be fully charged to handle all your essential load items.
So does that work then by, okay, there has to be a weather report that says there is a storm pending, or how's this established? Because with this crazy weather, storms pop up all the time unannounced. Would I then get stuck with this obligation just because it's not been reported as on a special weather station someplace?
That's a good question. I wish I had asked somebody from the Green Bank or Eversource exactly how they determine it, what weather reports they rely on, but I can only assume that they do have state of the art. They're very cognizant of, people purchasing batteries want to have them as a backup in the event of an emergency. So I think they err on the side of caution. So it's more likely that they would suspend the discharge and you won't be losing power. But we know that there have been tornadoes and lots of branches coming down. So there are a lot more outages in recent years than there were, say, 20 years ago.
Yeah, I know from my smart irrigation controller, for example, that we tie here in central, basically the heart of Greenwich, to the weather station at the airport, and it is about 85% accurate, but it's not 100%. So I could foresee that you could get into a lot of bureaucratic nonsense and having to prove that there was in fact an outage or a storm that wasn't really recorded in the White Plains Airport weather station.
Sabina, this has probably been the best question out of all of the presentations I've done for this program. So how about this? I will go back to my friends at the Green Bank and ask them that question, like exactly what they do rely on. So I want people to feel confident that, whatever methods are, protective of the consumer and they won't be left short in the event of an emergency. But I will try to get that information and I will send it to Peter and we'll put it up on the website. So
Thank you.
sorry I didn't have more of that tonight.
Bob, you might want to go back to an earlier slide you presented as well, that there are two options here. There's the buy it, own it, and it's all yours forever. Nobody can touch it. But that doesn't allow you to participate in the energy storage solutions program, which pays you back, which is why you'd want to enter into it, because you're getting payments from Eversource for them to be able to tap your battery from time to time. So,
right,
like Sabina really cared and didn't want anybody ever to touch her electricity, then she can simply buy it outright and still get the upfront ITC incentive, just not the payments from Eversource that would be payments for using that electricity.
Or the upfront incentive. So this gives you more flexibility, in terms of the contractor, the type of battery, and the use of your power. You're in control, and you do agree to cede some of that if you were to enroll in the Energy Storage Solutions program. You get the incentives, but you're, giving up some of your power for the good of the overall grid.
Go ahead, Sabina.
I understand. So thank you for that. And I will look for the information via Peter. I have one other question, actually. I assume I couldn't see the slide because it was kind of faint on the screenshot. Who exactly were the equipment providers? You mentioned some. My basic question goes to, are they all lithium iron batteries, or are they lithium iron phosphate batteries? And is there a distinction, or is it not even contemplated?
I think currently they're all lithium ion, but they're certainly open to other technologies, and we know that some are out there and others are coming. They're not precluded from participating, but it just happens that this is the more common chemical components of the current battery market. And Steve might know more about that because he's more of a technical guru than I am.
I also wonder, in terms of safety, since the lithium iron phosphate batteries are deemed to be more destruction proof, if you will, are there insurance benefits, for example, to installing them? I've never really heard contemplation of this, and I'd be really curious what you know about it, subject.
I'm not aware of any insurance benefits of one, chemical component over the other. We do receive a lot of questions about fire risks, and to our knowledge, there have never been any fires associated with these battery storage systems in Connecticut. I think we've seen headlines of vehicles or a bus happened to catch fire and presented some challenges to the first responders. It was a little harder to extinguish that. But battery storage systems, to my knowledge, there has never been a fire in Connecticut or frankly anywhere that we're aware of. The state did pass some modifications to the building code so that you need to be enclosed in something between the battery and the main part of the dwelling. But again, that's a question you can talk to your contractor about.
What do you mean by enclosed? Outside of the living space, or?
Yeah, I think they just have to be surrounded by something that will, block anything. But there have never been any fires. But they're more familiar with what the requirements are under the building code, and that would be built into the installation project cost.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Bob. Can we, let me see, Steve? There you are.
All right. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, indeed.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. That was a lot of great information, Bob. And thanks for having us here, Peter and team. I've done a lot of work with a lot of municipalities and townships. And I can say that Greenwich has one of the most well-organized and well thought out plans I've seen. Thinking long-term into the future with the incentives and things for these type of programs. So it's really great that, as this energy transition happens, there's a game plan in place and folks, providing unbiased information that's not just coming from, the internet or someone knocking on your door or this, that, or the other, but people that are, nonprofit folks looking at, what's best for the public good for everyone there. And it's a very refreshing way to approach these things. And I was looking to put a link there. I wish I was a guru. I'm still a beginner, a young Padawan here, but in terms of the chemistry, the new ones seem to be a lithium iron phosphate versus lithium ion. They're both very safe. I think there are some benefits. I'll check with our engineering team and get a list of which is which, but I think the lithium iron phosphate is much more stable. And like Bob was saying, some are rated that can be only outside, some are in the garage. In terms of like the safety, it's sort of the same but different. But in terms of the vehicles, I believe there's a 1 in 200% chance less for a vehicle fire. So there's definitely a lot of overblown hype. I think some of that is coming from fossil fuel industries or people perhaps that might be threatened by these types of transitions. But the Teslas, for example, and any of the electric vehicles are like 600 times less likely to have a fire incident. The issue is once they do get a runway thermal event, it can be a little bit more complex to put out. So nothing's perfect. The goal here is to make progress is kind of my attitude on it. Anyway, if anyone has any questions, feel free to chime in. I'll share my screen if that's okay. Can you see my screen here? Can you see that, Peter?
Yep, we got it.
Fantastic. So I'll just breeze a little bit, kind of the background and history of solar and batteries and electric vehicles. I tend to get excited and go off on tangents, so feel free to chime in and raise your hand or ask any questions if they may come up, and I'll try to stay focused and relevant to the topic at hand. I've been doing solar for in residential and commercial space for about 14 or 15 years now. I'm local to Greenwich currently. I got started in the solar industry in Hawaii in about 2009, 2008 or 9, which is when these tax credits and things first came out into play. And I kind of see Hawaii and parts of Europe and Asia and Australia and California to some extent, really as a postcard of 5 or 10 years in the future. So they've reached, 10, 20% of homes and businesses out there have solar, whereas we're back on the East Coast. We're kind of in the early days of this energy evolution and transformation. And so the first thing here, I don't know if you can see the year. This is back in 1931. So the first thing really is there's nothing new under the sun. This is not newfangled hippy dippy tree hugger technology. This is military grade, NASA grade equipment. Thomas Edison was talking about this 100 years ago. It's nothing new. Just like microwaves, radio, cell phones, computers, the internet, a lot of this was military based technology. So it's very rugged and it's been around for a while. My next slide here, I wanted to show you where I can bounce around. But the first thing here is there's several ways to go solar. And as Bob was saying, there's a couple different structures depending on what's best for you. It's really just math and physics at the end of the day to see which program works best for you. But the reason that you see so many people going solar now is, it's great to go green, but the green that, Fortune 500 companies and Wall Street investors and now homeowners are looking at on Main Street is saving cash and energy. So the way this is possible is we can essentially tap into a free energy resource, right? Nothing's free. What's the catch here? Well, the sun is actually a free nuclear reactor in the sky. It's where all life on Earth comes from, right? So the sun shines down, it makes plants grow. We can eat for energy or ferment for fun after 5 o'clock. That's all that beer and wine is. Even the gas in our car, it's old plants and dinosaur bones. So it all originally comes from the sun. Even oil and gas are essentially fossilized sunlight. And, nothing against coal miners or folks out there. It made the whole 20th century possible. We're really privileged and lucky with the benefits we have, but the Stone Age didn't end because we ran out of stones, right? I always ask folks, maybe our parents' generation, if they remember where they were when we landed on the moon. The reason being we could not have gone to the moon without solar panels. And if you can see some of these small pictures here, it's been on every satellite since 1958. Jimmy Carter had solar panels on the White House in the 70s during the oil embargo. I don't know if anyone remembers lines for gas. Amish folks have had solar for decades. I want to bounce back and forth a little bit here. So it's nothing new under the sun is my point, right? We've had this technology for a long time. It was actually discovered in the 1830s. And, I asked people at the moon landing, the idea is to think that this is, rugged military grade equipment. Not hippie tree hugger stuff. This is back in my Hawaii days. I had longer hair. So making the case that this is rugged and this works, it's very efficient, it's very proven. There's no moving parts to wear out. And this one guy was in his 70s or 80s. Said, yeah, I was in Florida at Cape Canaveral. Turns out he worked for NASA. And he was the one that told me, look, kid, this is not rocket science. It's basic chemistry and physics. Meaning whenever the sun shines down on silicon, which is more or less melted sand from the beach, it stimulates electrons somehow and makes electricity. So this is kind of like magic, or it's just physics really, and chemistry at the end of the day. And I think it was Arthur C. Clarke that said, sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. So I don't know exactly how it happens, but it's pretty cool. And we've known about this principle for almost 200 years, right? The reason we're having this conversation now and not 100 years ago or 50 years ago, not necessarily, I don't think there's any conspiracies from big oil, although they're happy to keep it sitting on the shelf gathering dust. It really boils down to, unfortunately, like most things in life, economics. So if you can see here, the orange is the price of a solar panel, the blue is the number of installations. So the cool thing about technology, right, is unlike everything else that gets more expensive over time, especially something like gas or electricity, right, where it's a modern miracle. You flip a switch and power comes on. We kind of take it for granted. I paint them as the big bad monopoly, which to some extent they are, although the grid is, it's a wonderful modern invention. And now you can even participate and make money selling grid services. So you're really going from a consumer that's historically been being taken advantage of by a monopoly to now you can be a prosumer or a producer and produce and store your own energy and even sell it back to the marketplace. So it's turning everything on its head, kind of like digital adoption with the cell phones, right? Cell phones versus landline, Netflix versus cable, Uber and Airbnb, right? Things like that, Amazon. And as the cost for electricity and gas and oil continues to increase, historically 4 to 7% every year for the last 100 years. It's almost tripled since the year 2000. Unfortunately, the last few years, rates have gone up 20, 30, 40%, went up 50% in one winter for Connecticut for the distribution side or the generation side, 70% in Texas. A lot of reasons for this. There's global inflation, conflicts around the world over energy, but things are going to always continue to get more expensive. Whereas technology does the exact opposite. It starts out very expensive and then gets radically exponentially better and faster and cheaper. So a solar panel costs 90% less than just 10 years ago, which was a 90% reduction since the 70s, right? Which is what technology tends to do, especially silicon and computer-based technologies, right? If you remember when cell phones first came out or flat screen TVs, they were 10 grand, right? A big Zach Morris briefcase phone. Now the phone fits in your pocket and literally has more computer power than everything combined when we went to the moon. And yes, we did leave the flat earth to go to the moon. Don't believe what you read on the internet. And it's 1,000,000 times cheaper for like almost 1,000,000 times more computer processing. So the human mind tends to think linear, but we're dealing with exponential improvements in technology here. So that's why this is all starting to happen now. And once you cross the tipping point with technology and it becomes better and faster and cheaper, such Netflix is cheaper than cable, the rate of adoption of consumers and businesses, that starts to grow exponentially. And it's easy to get depressed by perhaps the news or social media or the world. But if you look at the data in terms of technology adoption and also social improvements from the wheel to fire and things like democracy and civil rights, from the radio to the TV and now up to the internet age, technology adoption tends to grow exponentially, meaning it doubles every year, right? We think 1, 2, 3, 4. In reality, one person in your neighborhood goes solar, then 2 people, 4, 8, 16, and it continues to double. So this excites me. I think if we can evolve our consciousness in time to keep up with our technology, we have a chance to tap into abundant, essentially free resources. So you can harness your own power with solar panels, store it with batteries, and then affordable-ish electric cars. Now imagine powering your home and your cars essentially for free after about a 5 to 7 year payback. And this equipment then lasts for decades. The panels now have a 25 to 30 year warranty. But the panels will actually last 40 or 50 plus years. And this is not my opinion. There's still panels from the 70s and 80s that work great. They do degrade a little bit. It's about a 0.5 percentage point per year. So by year 30, you should be in the 80 to 90% range. So it's still going to work for a long time. There's no gears or engines or motors. As long as the sun shines, it's going to produce energy. Eventually, we can't get around the second law of thermodynamics, but this is going to last for decades. And the idea here is whether you choose to own it and take advantage of the tax credits or lease it and just get a solar as a service type model, you can save tens of thousands of dollars. It's really amazing that not only can you go green and do the right thing, which has so many ancillary benefits besides just the environment, but conflicts over oil and resource wars, unlocking abundant energy, A lot of the panels now with this IRA bill that that Bob mentioned are manufactured in the USA. So there's additional tax credits and incentives to manufacture the panels and the batteries, the computer chips, and the electric cars in the US. So we're having actually a manufacturing renaissance, which is wonderful. So imagine now, instead of sending 18-year-old kids off to fight and die in the Middle East for our oil addiction while making the world's worst terrorists and dictators rich, imagine now we're building factories here domestically. We're putting people to work with good, high-paying manufacturing jobs. The contractors, the construction workers can't be outsourced. So this is happening on your roof or on your school or at your business, retrofitting heat pumps and electrifying everything, and then powering it by cheap, reliable American-made solar panels. To me, that's a much more inspiring and optimistic vision of the future, right? We have this technology. We've had this technology for a long time, but only really in the last few years has it become affordable. And as that happens, we're seeing the mass adoption. So the top people doing this, it's no longer just Whole Foods and rich hippies in California, right? It's Walmart, Target, the bougie Walmart, Google, Apple, Costco, Amazon. The US military is the largest user of energy on Earth. They also have the most solar deployed. So the Pentagon, a lot of these Fortune 500 companies, Wall Street, hedge funds, this is Greenwich, I believe, is the hedge fund capital of the world. All the smart money is investing in renewables. It has absolutely nothing to do with the environment or the rainforest or ESG or butterflies, although those are all wonderful things that I'm passionate about. If Walmart and Wall Street is doing this, it's because it works and it saves money. So now folks on Main Street can also take advantage of it, because people aren't really aware of this economic story. People aren't aware that the cost of solar literally plummeted 90% in a decade. So now it's the cheapest form of energy on Earth. Meaning, I gotta go now. Get out of here. Sorry. Sorry about that. Klein. I'll get to the point here. Sorry, that was can you hear me okay? Forgot to silence my phone there. So solar is the cheapest form of energy on Earth. So we could have done this a long time ago, but it was about a 500-year payback in the 70s when Jimmy Carter did it on the White House. About a 30 to 50-year payback about a decade ago. Now in Connecticut, we're at about a 4 to 7-year payback, depending on how you do this. And so I'll briefly get into the ways we can do this. And if folks have some questions, be happy to chat about this in more specifics. But one option is the solar as a service model. So in this scenario, we're going to come out and install solar panels at your home for free for zero cost. The reason we're willing to do this, it's not out of the goodness of our hearts. It's a tax equity play and it's a business play. So our investors, they're willing to put up the capital and the money for this. They're going to buy the equipment. We're going to install it literally for no cost, and they're going to take your tax credits and rebates. So that 30% ITC, the investment tax credit, 30% of the system cost. So just the solar system, you're looking probably 10 to 15,000 in federal tax credits. If you add on batteries, your tax credit, the beauty of it is 30% of the battery system is also a federal tax credit. So that's a wonderful thing we do for lots of retired folks that might not be able to use tax incentives. Also a lot of schools and churches, nonprofits, townships, municipalities. So in that case, someone else is footing the bill. It literally costs nothing, and you're just locking in a lower rate. And the way I like to think of this, let's say we had a time machine and we could go back to the year 2000, and gas for your car is $1 a gallon. What if we locked it in? I gave you a gas card for 95 cents forever. Now, most people's reaction is, big deal, who cares about a nickel? Well, if we look at your average home, you're using 10 to 20,000 kilowatts is how they measure it. A school district might be using 10 million. I think when Peter ran the numbers, Greenwich as a town is using something like 20 or 30 million kilowatt hours. So even a few cents cheaper for your home will save you a couple $100 right away, which is not a big deal, right? It's just some pocket money. The big thing here is we can lock that in. So as gas and electricity goes up every single year and you're locked in, now it's 25, 30 years later, everyone else is spending $3 or $4 a gallon for gas, and you've been at 90 cents for 25 years. The average residential PPA or lease will save you 15, 20, 30, even $40,000, protecting you from compound interest. right? Which Einstein called the eighth wonder of the world. So it's not a coincidence that the electric company that just had a 100-year monopoly is raising their rates 5 to 7%, right? That's our buddy, not Jimmy Buffett, Warren Buffett, right? The law of 72. Probably a lot of Greenwich folks are familiar with this. Most of America probably, unfortunately, is not familiar with this, right? But compound interest, you take the interest rate, divide it by 72, and that's how long it takes your money to double. So big surprise, why are they raising your rate a minimum of 70% or then 70% when there's volatility? Well, basically every decade or so, your electric rates double, and the Wall Street investors who own the utilities, their money doubles. So that's how even a little discount of pennies times thousands of kilowatts over decades can save 20, 30, $40,000. And if you said, hey, you know, that sounds too good to be true, what's the catch? The catch is they're getting your tax incentives and rebates. If you would prefer, like Bob said, you can buy the equipment, but most folks, what we want to do is finance it. So you're going to buy the equipment. We can finance it for you, or you can finance it yourself. The goal is to set up a payment plan where it basically pays for itself. So put up enough panels to get rid of your $200-300 electric bill. Ideally, if your house is, you know, facing the right way and doesn't have much shade. For the average home, we can produce most of your power, if not all of it, for the year. So get rid of your $200 or $300 bill, get it down to $10 or $20 just to be plugged into the grid. You're always going to have just a hookup fee. If we can make all your power, you're going to get rid of it because you're now producing it yourself. And then ideally make the payment plan that same $200 or $300. For a larger house, it's more, smaller, it's less. So the beauty is you're not digging in your pocket to write a check. Your electric bill is basically paying for this. So it can be a cash flow positive situation from day one. And then on next year's taxes, I'm not an accountant, but the way the solar works is 30% of whatever the solar and battery costs is a federal tax credit. So next year you're going to get $10, $15, $20,000 as tax as a straight one-to-one tax credit. So it's far better than just the tax deduction you get to going for, you know, donating to charity. So that's the main thing. I could have simplified the whole spiel of landing on the moon, and the history lesson is not really that important. I think it's interesting and it's kind of relevant of how we got to now and proving the use case of this essentially military grade technology to, you know, it doesn't matter so much how we got here, it's how we're going forward. But you can be confident that this technology works and it's going to work for decades. So if we can set you up here where get rid of your electric bill, you make a monthly payment to own it. On next year's taxes, ideally you're getting $10,000, $15,000 back, wiping off 30%. If we do the battery scenario, which Bob did an excellent deep dive on the information, and we could take more of that if folks are interested offline. Connecticut has the best battery incentives in the country, hands down. In most other states, I recommend holding off on batteries. I always say that going solar is like planting a money tree, meaning it will pay for itself and then save you 4, 5, 6 times its value. So if we do just solar alone, and we could have it paid off in about 5 years in Connecticut, 5 to 7, right? Once that system's paid off, you now have no electric bills for the next 25 plus years. So even in today's money, if electric never increases and you're now saving $200, $300, $400 a month, or a lot bigger bills for bigger houses, we don't think about that. It's not a big deal, but times 12 months a year, that's $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 for electricity and rising at a compound rate. So over 25, 30 years, this will pay for itself and then save the average home $60,000, $80,000, $100,000, larger homes much more. So it's incredible how much it can save, right? When done properly, this is typically an ROI and an IRR over, you know, 15, 20%, meaning, you know, that's why Wall Street is investing in this, and now why Main Street can as well, because it's not, when I used to work at Tesla doing electric cars, it's not sexy or interesting as that, right? Electricity is boring. Who cares about a kilowatt? But the solar panels can save you enough money to buy an electric car and pay it off, and then power your home and car for free for the next 30, 40, 50 plus years, getting your own power plant that essentially pays for itself. I don't know anything like that besides perhaps a garden, right? The way I like to make analogies to try to understand things. But imagine solar used to be like going to Whole Foods, right? A super expensive, you had to pay 4 times more for organic kale juice. Now going solar is like planting a money tree in your backyard. So doing the lease or the PPA, that's just like going to the Amish farmers market. There's no cost at all to you. You just get a cheaper rate for the organic, better quality green energy because you're cutting out the middleman and going right to the source. And then if you want to plant the solar farm on your roof or your backyard, you can get $10,000 to $15,000 from the federal government, several thousand from the state of Connecticut to add on these battery systems. Once that's paid off in 5 to 7 years, you're literally saving tens of thousands of years. So you're for our, maybe I'm stretching it, but for our farm analogy, once it's paid off, you eat for free. You get massive tax credits to have a solar farm, and you can even sell back your electrons or extra tomatoes to the grid by letting them use your battery, like Peter was saying, that will basically almost pay for the battery. So it's really like a triple dip where you can not only save money, but make money and take advantage of tax incentives. It makes your home more valuable is what we tend to find. Zillow and the Wall Street Journal have done over a decade of research on this. And on average, homes with solar tend to sell for about 4 to 9% more and about 20 or 30% faster. So there's a lot of benefits here. And I could talk about this for days, and I'm probably time for the sheep hook. But wait, there's more. It slices, it dices, it chops. But the bottom line with this is solar is a way to save a lot of money for your home and your family that you can invest in more important things. And with the batteries now coming into play, right, with this massive cost decline, as the cost for solar and batteries and electric cars is doing this same cost curve here. This is, Moore's law and Swanson's law with technology, right? Like we've talked about with the computers, is now not only can you produce the energy, you can store it. And so that you have resiliency in the event of power outages. As Sabine was saying, the weather is only getting crazier. It's getting hotter every year. And so as that, storms are more intense, the grid's getting older, the grid's over 100 years old in certain places. And so now not only can you save money, but you can have the peace of mind to store that energy. And you can also participate in ancillary services, sell some energy back to the grid, make the grid more reliable, and you make money from it. So that's a quick background on solar. Love to chat about this more with anybody that's interested. I could chat about this for days. All it takes to check out solar for your home, we look at your house on the satellite, look at, like Bob was saying, ideally south is the best, east and west. If you need some trees cut, we can even trim those. The good thing for us tree huggers, of which I'm one, every solar system is the equivalent of planting several thousand trees over its 30-year lifespan in terms of the amount of pollution avoided. So you can feel okay about that or feel good about that. And we probably would take less time than this to get a free proposal for your home or your business. We look at your energy usage. So there's a graph on your bill there. We're looking to see how much energy you use, and we can plug it into the algorithm, get a preliminary proposal to look at the lease versus you getting the tax incentives and financing, see if it might make sense for you. And like Bob was saying, word of mouth is the best thing. So we're all about, the developers and companies that I work with, they have a great referral program where anyone that signs up, they want to donate some money to the charity of your choice instead of spending money on advertising and marketing. So the goal here is to go green and save green and try to help out the community a little bit. It's not Mother Teresa, but we are, planting some trees and hoping, put some folks to work and save you some money ultimately. So yeah, if anyone has any questions, I guess Sabine has some questions. Here's my contact info. My name's Steve. You can call me at 484-782-4372. Feel free to email me or reach out anytime. Happy to talk about this anytime with folks, and we can help out homes and businesses and schools and anything under the sun, really.
Steve,
Sabine?
that was terrific. Thank you. So let's take a couple of questions. Our scheduled stop was at 7 p.m., so we're a little over. Thank you all for sticking around. Any questions? Let's ask them now. And then again, here's Steve's information. And you can also contact me or Bob Wall with any follow-up questions.
Yes, Sabine, I guess, did you have some questions? I think you can unmute on the bottom left there.
Yeah, Peter, if you have others, people asking questions, please reach to them as well. I stand back.
No, please go ahead. Nobody else has raised their hand at this point, so ask away.
Okay, so then in that case, you made the comparison to the phone. Our phones have vastly increased in computing power and efficiency, and I mean, the technology from 10 years ago has been absolutely surpassed and is amazing. Has there been any major technical advancement in solar panels?
Excellent question. You are sharp. Are you like in engineering in your life, or just read about this stuff?
Well, I happen to be building some high-end homes from time to time. Plus, I have a channel that talks about smart, healthy, green kind of solutions to our homes.
Excellent. So that's a great question, right? The whole pitch of solar is, and technology, it gets better and faster and cheaper. Not just, why not wait till there's drones, 3D printing, clear solar glass on everything, which I think will happen eventually. There's the main differences between Moore's law and Swanson's law. So Moore's law is for the computer chip. Every, I think, 16 months, it gets half as big, twice the output, and cheaper. Named after somebody Moore from Intel, I think, one of the computer chip companies. And that's why this is 1,000,000 times cheaper. The difference with solar is Swanson's law. Basically, anytime you double the manufacturing of anything, it gets about 20 or 30% cheaper. So solar is essentially the same exact technology as 1839 and the 1900s prototypes. Now, it has gotten more efficient. I think the first cells were about 5% maybe. We're now at 21, 22, 23%. The maximum you can capture by the laws of physics with silicon is 30%. So we're getting up towards the window of the maximum we can capture. And the price, the exponential, so the technology improvement is linear, meaning 10 years ago, we were installing 250-watt solar panels. 5 years ago, it was 300-watt solar panels. Now it's 400 watts. So they're getting a little bit more energy dense. And maybe they were 10 years ago, 19%. Now they're 21%. So very incremental, and we're almost at the cap, right? So the exponential in solar has been the price decline. So the cost has declined 90%. The technology is not going to improve that much more. There's other stuff, Perscovite and stuff like universities and research labs, and I'm sure someone will come up with something. I think the stuff in space. So for this scenario, don't wait for the flying hover car. The Model T is good. We're for the lease, we're not buying technology, we're buying energy. So it's going to get you where you need to go. And if you can produce 100% of your energy now, and you have a 25 or 30-year warranty on the hardware, it doesn't matter if in 10, like let's say today we could do 10 years ago, 30 200-watt solar panels to make all your power. Today, maybe it's 25 400-watt solar panels. In 10 years, it might be 20 500-watt solar panels. So it's going to continue to get a little bit better always. But I would say don't miss out, because those tax incentives and policies and those things all come and go with the winds. And I hope folks are kind of measured and grounded in researching policy and don't get swept up in reactionary fascist hysteria, is what all I will say. So the IRA and those tax incentives and the ITC, that's leading a manufacturing renaissance in America. But certain folks want to repeal all that for ideological reasons. I don't understand why, but they think, I don't know, electric cars. And I always thought the conservative fiscal mantra was that tax credits and tax cuts lead to manufacturing and lead to job growth and industry growth, which is the wonderful story that's happening with solar. It's really a policy success story. You know, it's a great intersection of technology, research, policy, and then the free market innovation with all the Wall Street investors that are living in Greenwich. And then you have this, you know, mass market adoption from, you know, Wall Street and Fortune 500 down to Main Street and Amish farmers. So it's really a success story of taking this new expensive technology, not too dissimilar from computers were back in the Silicon Valley days, right? This stuff was invented in Bell Labs, right in northern New Jersey, where the computer chip and the satellite, the original Silicon Valley on the East Coast. But the tax credits and these incentives help this very niche, expensive technology go mainstream, and then the free market can run with it. So we want to keep these incentives in place, but with or without them, solar is still the cheapest form of energy on Earth. Even if you took away that tax incentive, maybe it pushes the payback from 5 to 7 years to 9 or 10 years. So it's still a money machine that's going to save you a lot of money.
Steve, let me stop you there just for a second. And I would say to Sabine, there have been innovations like microinverters, bifacial panels. I think the biggest innovation that's going on right now, which is the topic of this conversation, is combining with batteries and advanced software that allows for that combination to manage your house, manage the grid, increase resilience in a way that has never been possible. So let's jump to Eugenia and get her question. Eugenia, you had a question?
I think on the bottom left, click on your microphone there to. I think you're muted. If you click on the bottom left, it'll unmute you. There you go. Oh.
You're unmuted on our end, but Steve, why don't you pop up your details just as a parting shot, and you can always come back to me or Bob or Steve with any questions. We will post this recording probably in about a week, and for those of you who registered, we'll be able to send you the presentations by email. So anyway, I want to thank everyone. Bob, do you have any last thoughts?
No, I was just going to suggest if Eugenia wanted to type the question, that was an option.
Unfortunately, the town doesn't allow chat.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That's
Never mind then. You could send any questions to Steve, Peter, or myself, and we'll try to get you the answers as soon as possible.
All right. Well, I want to thank Bob. I want to thank Steve. I want to thank all of the attendees. Thank you. And please, give this some consideration. As Steve said, the best advertisement is to put this on your own house, put this in your own garage. And I think we'll all be the better for it. So thank you all. And we will see you on another webinar soon.